this video, we're going to explore employment law and the serious impact it can have on businesses. When we talk about employment law, we mean any piece of government legislation or laws designed to protect people employed by a business. This includes legislation covering recruitment, pay, discrimination, and working conditions. We'll look at each area of employment law in turn. First, let's meet the main example for this video. This is Judge Jackie Jenkins. Judge Jackie is in court to hear a high-profile case that has been brought against a fast food chain called Rocky Roosters, a company that appears to have broken every category of employment law. It's one of the most complicated employment law cases that Jackie has ever had to deal with in over 20 years as a highly respected judge. Judge Jackie has requested a huge amount of evidence as she wants to make sure that she makes the right decisions. The press and social media are having a field day with this story, and she wants to make sure that she has all the information and evidence she needs to ensure a fair outcome. Judge Jackie starts by looking at recruitment legislation, which explains exactly what a business must and must not do when recruiting their staff. You know, by law. Firstly, at the very beginning, when you're being recruited, you are protected by legislation. The recruitment process must be fair, and all applicants should have an equal chance of getting a particular job. Judge Jackie looks into the recruitment processes used at Rocky Roosters. There have been allegations that some of the branch managers have been offering jobs to their friends and family, in preference to other people who have applied for roles, often including highly experienced people who have worked for similar fast food chains and have excellent references. Judge Jackie is concerned that this goes against recruitment legislation and decides to dig a little deeper. By law, when a job offer has been made, the new starter must be given a contract of employment within 2 months of their start date. This should include details of pay, holiday allowances, duties and responsibilities, how much notice must be given if the worker decides to leave their job, and any other terms of the employment. Judge Jackie asks for evidence and examples of employment contracts from a number of different Rocky Rooster branches, and is horrified to discover that no new employment contracts have been issued in the last 5 years. To all the teachers out there, show all of these videos without any ads and gain access to our growing library of over 500 teaching worksheets. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? Next, Judge Jackie decides to look at whether Rocky Roosters is meeting pay legislation, which is designed to make sure that employees are paid at least a legal minimum amount per hour. And this was brought in to make sure that the lowest paid workers' incomes were increased. Each year, the government sets the minimum hourly rate, which varies by age. There are 2 main laws that you need to know about: the National Minimum Wage Act of 1998 and the National Living Wage Act 2016. People aged between 16 to 22 are paid the national minimum wage. It varies according to age. There are different rates for age brackets, and there are different rates for people on apprenticeships. People aged 23 or over must be paid the national living wage, which is slightly higher than the national minimum wage. Judge Jackie decides to look at whether Rocky Roosters are paying all of their staff at least the legal minimum hourly rate of pay. She knows that the HMRC has recently investigated pay at Rocky Roosters, so she asks their investigators to share their findings with her. The legal minimum pay rates are increased at least once a year, and the rates were changed most recently in April. Jackie reads that Rocky Roosters didn't actually pay increases to their staff for 2 months after the new rates became law. She also sees that there are quite a few people who are 23 or older but are being paid the minimum wage rate for a 21-year-old. This is clearly illegal under the National Minimum Wage Act 1998 and the National Living Wage Act 2016. It's not looking good for Rocky Roosters. Judge Jackie then moves on to discrimination legislation, which is designed to make sure employees treat all staff fairly. The Equality Act 2010 wraps up 116 other smaller legislations into one big act. It's really important you remember the name of this and the others detailed in this video, along with their dates, as this will help you pick up all of the available marks in any exam questions on the topic. Importantly, the Equality Act 2010 makes it illegal to discriminate on a number of grounds. The grounds are called protected characteristics. Protected characteristics include age, disability, gender, marital status, pregnancy and maternity, sexual orientation, race and religious belief. So basically, you can't treat anybody differently based on these characteristics, and if you do, you're breaking the law. The Equality Act also makes it illegal to pay people different rates of pay if they're doing exactly the same job or really similar jobs in the same business. As an example, a male employee cannot be paid more money than his female colleague if they are employed to do the same role. It probably sounds a little strange to you to have to clarify this, but it used to be a big issue, with men often being paid more than females doing exactly the same job. Luckily, nowadays, at least here in the UK, lots of employers have actually come to their senses. Bring this video and over 100 more to life with fun, interactive games, quizzes and case studies. Why not try the first 25 completely free by visiting BizzWizard.co.uk. As a legal expert, Judge Jackie is well aware that employees are also protected from what we call unfair dismissal. An employee can only lose their job for a so-called good reason, or because they decided to leave a business. Good reasons include severe or repeated misconduct, and an employee could also be made redundant if a business needs to cut costs or a role no longer exists. But the process of choosing who will be made redundant needs to be done fairly. Unfair dismissal includes sacking someone or forcing them out of their job for any reason that isn't fair, including because the employee has a protected characteristic, like being pregnant, or because of their age. If a business dismisses someone because of a protected characteristic, they could face an expensive legal battle, compensation payouts, and significant damage to their reputation. Judge Jackie has been told about some allegations of discrimination. Recently, a pregnant branch manager was sacked by Rocky Roosters and replaced with a male manager. The area manager was actually overheard saying, "At least he won't be going off on maternity leave or asking for special treatment." Judge Jackie knows that this is unfair dismissal, as the female manager was dismissed because of a protected characteristic. In other words, because she was pregnant. The female manager who was sacked took her story to the national newspaper, which ran a front-page story. The female manager has also discovered that she and other female managers were paid significantly lower salaries than her male colleagues for doing exactly the same job. Judge Jackie requests salary information for all of the branch managers and can see for herself that there is a clear discrimination on the grounds of gender, which goes against the Equality Act 2010. So next, Judge Jackie looks into several allegations that Rocky Roosters have been breaking the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. This legislation is concerned with working conditions and states that health and safety policies should be put in place. Both the business and its workers have responsibilities when it comes to keeping the working environment safe, including making sure staff are trained, making sure they have safety equipment, including tools and necessary clothing where appropriate, making sure employees have access to drinking water, access to toilets which are suitable, and also that first aid equipment is available where needed. At Rocky Roosters, there have been a number of cases where new employees haven't been given proper training when using equipment such as deep fryers, and they've had to be treated in hospital for minor burns, which fortunately weren't more serious. In at least a couple of these cases, there was no first aid kit even available, or no one in the branch who actually knew first aid. Judge Jackie is very concerned, but not particularly surprised to hear about this. Finally, it comes to Judge Jackie's attention that Rocky Roosters are not following the Working Time Regulations 1998, which was amended in 2003. These regulations limit the number of hours that employees can expect staff to work, and specify the breaks that employees are entitled to. The regulations ensure that staff can only be asked to work, on average, up to 48 hours per week. This average is taken importantly over a 17-week period of time. It makes sure that employees are entitled to a minimum of 5.6 weeks holiday per year, pro rata depending on how many days they actually work. They have a minimum of 1 day off each week. They have at least 11 consecutive hours off in every 24-hour period, and that they take a 20-minute break when working more than 6 hours. It's important to note here that if an employee is in agreement, they can sign a document which means that they are not held to this legislation. For example, they could work more than 48 hours a week. From the payroll information that she's seen, several employees in Rocky Roosters branches are being regularly asked to work more than 48 hours a week, on average over a 17-week period. They are also regularly working 7-day weeks without being given a day off, and they're not being allowed to take their holiday entitlement. Judge Jackie asks to see evidence that the staff involved have signed anything to opt out of the working time regulations, but isn't surprised when Rocky Roosters can't produce this evidence. In summary, Judge Jackie's findings are that Rocky Roosters are on rocky ground. They have broken every single employment law. Her verdict is very damning indeed, and Rocky Roosters face paying off huge fines and compensation, as well as the story of this groundbreaking legal case being all over the news and social media. Before we go any further, let's have a look at the advantages that Rocky Roosters would have had if they had followed employment law instead of breaking every rule in the book. Let's first look at pay legislation. If Rocky Roosters had increased wages in line with the national minimum or living wage, there's a possibility that higher pay could have been quite motivating to their workers, meaning that they might have been more productive. But that may only have lasted for a short period of time, particularly as most staff would have been aware that they were legally entitled to this pay increase. However, if Rocky Roosters had actually paid at least the legal minimum hourly rate to its employees, then it would have avoided the large fine that Judge Jackie imposed on them. They may have also avoided the investigations from the HMRC and from Judge Jackie's own investigations, which would have been very time-consuming. HMRC are also known to name and shame companies such as Rocky Roosters who do not pay the legal minimum wage. They could have avoided this and the damage to their reputation if they had just paid at least the minimum, particularly as the press are very keen to share details of this story with the public. Each of the video courses over at BizzWizard.co.uk also includes an interactive business case study that applies the knowledge learned to a real-world scenario. There are over 1,000 multiple-choice questions, each with detailed feedback, which tests students' understanding of the content. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? Let's now look at advantages that Rocky Roosters would have had if they'd have followed equality legislation. Equality legislation helps prevent discrimination in the workplace and should, in theory, help create a more diverse workforce, and to resolve gender pay issues, which would have been much better for Rocky Roosters' reputation. If Rocky Roosters had not discriminated against its employees and hadn't been found guilty by Judge Jackie, then it wouldn't have needed to pay compensation and its reputation would have not been harmed. The same applies to following legislation about unfair dismissal and having a fair recruitment process. So what about the impact of health and safety at work and the working time regulations? The advantages to Rocky Roosters of staying within the legislation would have included a safer workplace, lower absenteeism, meaning hopefully increased productivity. If they had followed these regulations, then they wouldn't have faced prosecution, had to pay compensation, or face damage to their reputation. Let's now have a closer look at the potential disadvantages of these different employment legislations, as this may help us understand better why Rocky Roosters ended up breaking so many employment laws. We've already seen that the potential motivating effects of increasing pay in line with minimum wage may only last for a short time. The main disadvantage for Rocky Roosters is that higher labour costs could lead to lower profits, or they may have to put their prices up, which could impact sales. There may also be a lot of administration workload around making changes to the payroll system at Rocky Roosters head office to make sure employees are getting this new rate of pay. Let's now look at the potential disadvantages to Rocky Roosters of equality legislation. The downside of equality legislation, and probably the reason Rocky Roosters haven't followed it, is that it can be expensive to put into place. It may involve time and expense for staff training and creating documents such as staff handbooks to reflect the company's policies. So, what about the impact of health and safety and working time regulations? Again, the disadvantages here are simply higher costs, for example, offering staff training and policy handbooks. We've seen that businesses have to deal with some major employment legislation, particularly around pay, equality, and health and safety. If you get an exam question about employment law, it's important to know the legislation discussed in this video. Be careful. Often the exam question will be interested in the impact of these laws on the business and not necessarily the employee. You may lose marks if you focus on the benefits of the employee too much. Ensuring compliance with employment legislation is a must, regardless of whether you have 1 employee or 1,000 employees. The implication of not doing so really can be catastrophic for a business, as we've seen with the way that Judge Jackie dealt with Rocky Roosters. This has been the BizzWizard.